Bhatia,
Here.
Meyer,
Here.
Driver,
Here.
Hewitt,
Here.
Bristler.
Here.
Sorry, Frank, I couldn't see you. Van Beckham.
Here.
Bosanowski.
Here.
Right, next will be the approval of the meeting minutes from December 21st, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes of December 21, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be under new business, 6915 Washington Avenue Site Plan Review, SP 23-1. Sam.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant applied to demolish the existing vet clinic and build a 2,478 square foot Taco John's restaurant and drive-through establishment. SP 23-1 includes 2 connections to Prairie Drive, connection to Washington Avenue public sidewalk and outdoor patio, motor vehicle parking, thanks Dustin, short-term bicycle parking, a trash enclosure, and 2 drive-through lanes. The application follows the comprehensive plan. The village does not have an adopted plan for local planning area 15. Neither the Parks and Open Space Plan nor the Master Bicycle Plan identify any improvements for the parcel. For the Chapter 90 standards, the application meets all of the requirements, including the established district description, accessory uses and structures, district descriptions, allowed uses, lot and building regulations, and other regulations which are further down. There's no overlay districts for the property. The B3 district permits restaurants and bars, food, and drive-in or drive-through establishments by right in terms of use classifications. In terms of accessory structures and uses, the village permits the trash enclosure structure as an accessory structure. In terms of sewer and water service, this complies. In terms of parking and access, there are a couple notes for improvement. First, the applicant must validate that the short-term bike parking includes a rack that accommodates at least 30 spaces per the parking ratios. There is a bike rack shown on the plans. It just says detail to be provided, and for us to get formal approval, we need to see the detail. So, second, the applicant must provide sidewalks. Per the code, the applicant may qualify for the in lieu of sidewalk fee. We wanted to call that out because that's a new change that you guys approved last year to pay in lieu of. It is a rural cross-section along Prairie Drive. There are existing sidewalks along 20. For the third note, the applicant must revise the internal pedestrian circulation crossing of the drive aisle. When the internal pedestrian circulation system crosses the drive aisle, it must be clearly differentiated through use of elevation changes, different paving material, or other equally effective methods of safely accommodating non-motorized travel. As approved by myself, striping alone does not meet this requirement. Examples of this in the past have been more durable thermoplastic tape, stained concrete. Some do like a raised pedestrian walk as well. So there's a variety of options there that they can choose. And finally, the traffic impact analysis was not complete at the time of application. The applicant must revise the site plan to install any traffic improvements required in the TIA by the village or the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. They have submitted it to DOT. We've seen the general scope and have no issues with it. I'm not expecting a lot as part of the TIA. It's pretty much a one-for-one, conversion, but because it's not formally approved and we don't have that letter back from the DOT, we just wanted to include that as a condition. It's not uncommon that the DOT will take a while to get through them because they have the entire southeast region to look at. Division 90-425 for outdoor lighting, the applicant must reduce the correlated color temperature of all the proposed lighting fixtures to 3,000 Kelvin per the code. Some are identified at 4,000 Kelvin, but they do have a 3,000 option, so they can use the same lighting fixtures. They just need to reduce the color temperature. And then finally, the applicant shall revise the landscaping plan to provide a detail on the proposed fencing along the south property line to ensure the fencing meets the code. As it stands, everything meets the landscaping and screening section of the ordinance. We just need to make sure that the fencing proposed qualifies under the opaque fencing section per the ordinances. The application is subject to review and approval procedures in Division 90-540 site plan review. The application is subject to measurements and terminology in Article 600 of the zoning code. From a fiscal impact, the application does not lie within a tax incremental district, nor did the applicant request any tax incremental financing. The current assessed value for the 1 acre property is $355,900. Fast food restaurants and drive-throughs westwards along Washington Avenue include McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, and of approximately values per acre of about $1.1 to $1.85 million. An average of these values places a minimum value for the restaurant at somewhere around $1.5 million. With 217 feet of local frontage, 6.8% of the village taxes collected over 20 years must go to repaving. That's Prairie Drive. This is less than the 8.3% average that the village dedicates to its annual paving program, indicating the development will cover its approximate share of the public infrastructure. Washington Avenue is a state trunk highway and is maintained by the county using state funding. For additional staff considerations, the article states that noise for drive-throughs particularly, noise, sound attenuation walls, landscaping, or other mitigation measures may be required by the village to ensure that the drive-through facility will not have adverse noise-related impacts on nearby residential uses. The application provides our district screening, option B, by including 1 evergreen tree or 2 tall shrubs per 10 linear feet and a 6-foot opaque fence or wall. The village staff find this proposed screening matches the intent of the ordinance and sufficiently screens the south residential property. During the public hearing for the related zoning map amendment, one neighbor expressed concern regarding the traffic flow to and from the site. The traffic impact analysis should address the roadway geometry, and the village staff recommend the applicant clearly delineate the north drive-through exit and south drive-through entrance driveways when they submit their sign plan applications, which is pretty common for drive-through restaurants. We'd anticipate they would anyways, but we just wanted to make a note of it. The village staff have the conditions listed in the endnotes for approval. Those are the 6 ones that we previously stated, and with those 6 recommendations, we recommend approval.
All right. Any questions of Sam?
Well, I have a couple, but go ahead. Ralph, go ahead.
Yes, Sam, quick question. On your condition number 2, the applicant shall update the site plan to provide sidewalks, and then you say the applicant may qualify for this something in lieu of the sidewalk per ordinance. We require the sidewalk, yes or no? And so what's this, the fee in lieu of the sidewalk? Can you elaborate on that, please?
So the ordinance says that they are required to put a sidewalk in Prairie Drive.
Correct.
But in areas where the village is not planning to put in a sidewalk, which we are not in Prairie Drive anytime soon as part of our 5-year capital plan, and when it's a rural cross-section, and when they can essentially prove that putting in a sidewalk would be infeasible due to stormwater, engineering, or other requirements, then they can pay an in lieu of fee to a dedicated fund for sidewalks and bike improvements in the village. So they would need to make the argument to us to say that it's infeasible, and we would take a look at their argument and be able to judge it one way or another. If they don't give us that argument, or we judge that that argument is kind of lackluster, then the base assumption is that they have to put in a sidewalk. So
Thank you.
it's put in a sidewalk, except for if they go through the process to try to pay the in lieu of fee.
Got it. Thank you.
In regards to that sidewalk, assuming that they are going to put a sidewalk in there, will they also have to address a pedestrian access to their building as well, off of the side street?
Off of Prairie Drive?
Yes.
Generally, no. We only require one entrance to, the code only requires one entrance to it connecting from the public sidewalk. And the code specifically states it should be the closest and shortest route. It gives preference, which actually is the 20 sidewalk. So the code would not require one. We'd certainly welcome one if they wanted to include it, but that would have to comply with the rest of the internal pedestrian connection system. So my guess is it's better off of 20 without seeing the actual design for the Prairie Drive sidewalk.
Okay. In regards to the north, I'll call it exit, because that's what you're calling it, how are they going to set that up to stop cars from going in there?
I don't think they can, and as of now, the driveway's not set up to do it. You could have like a turning movement, so you can only take right-ins. As of now, the site plan shows that it is a double wide, typically a 24-foot driveway entrance on the north, and you could turn in and then go all the way down the south. You see the bi-directional arrows on the west side of the property there, and then enter the drive-through that way. We didn't indicate that they should close that down, but typically what you see with McDonald's and the other drive-throughs is they point you towards the best entrance, and the other signage indicates that to expect exiting vehicles. So
Yeah.
it's not to say that you can't use it, but it's better to go further south.
Oh, because it's fairly close to Highway 20, and that's why I'm saying if somebody comes in there, somebody might not be paying attention when they come around the corner, and they're stopped waiting to pull in that first driveway.
Sure. And I think if the DOT has anything to say regarding the traffic impact analysis, that's probably the most likely. They do have authority over that area because it is within the influence area of the intersection, which means that car queuing might happen south from 20 for people looking to take a left or a right. So I think if they are required to do anything, it'll come through that TIA document.
Thank you.
Sam, a couple of questions. When we're being asked to approve site plan review SP-23-1.
Yep.
What is SP-23-1? There's no document that's nominated as that.
It's the entire submittal package.
It's a package thing.
Yeah, it's everything you have in your packet.
Okay.
The site plan review is cumulative of landscaping, lighting, the site plan, the elevations, everything else.
So if something changes along the way in terms of tweaking this or fine tuning it, it would still be the SP-23-1 we're approving today, presumably.
Yes, correct.
And the SP is site plan,
Site plan review,
and then
yeah.
year 23, first one.
I've just got a general comment. I wish you would, in your executive write-ups, when the owner is not the applicant, you should, I think, connect the dots between the owner and the applicant for us, because here, the applicant is an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
She's not the owner. I don't know, is Dynakin Investments developing this property? Is the property under contract to sale to somebody else, which is this Pentax company? Does Lisa work for Pentax? I just don't know. I know you and Sam learn these sorts of things in the course of working with the people, but please, I think for my sake, or maybe just clarity, a couple sentences just saying Dynakin is the owner, the property's under contract of sale or to
I can do the
Pentax
best I can in the future, Tom, but oftentimes we don't know because we're not involved in the private land sale. And sometimes these LLCs are a little bit opaque. So in general, yes, blanket, we will try to do our best. But just to qualify, sometimes we don't require, when someone submits an application, they sign a legal statement saying, I indicate I have authority to do this. So the village is saying, like, we are not liable if you're submitting something and you don't have the actual authority to submit it. We just review it when it comes in, and they sign the disclaimer saying that they have the authority to submit on the developer's behalf. So oftentimes we can connect those dots, but there are times when the owners really want to stay out of it. That's why they hire consultants, and they're assigning someone to speak completely on their behalf.
The owner is a public record. If they want, a collection of people want to come to this body and get us to approve zoning maps, special, anything, plan reviews, I think we're entitled to ask who's who.
Sure,
I
you
don't think
can.
there's- yeah, well,
I don't
you
know that you
should.
could deny it just because you didn't know who the owner was.
Well, you can say, I want the owner to be the applicant then, because I can't apply to rezone your house just because, I want to. I mean,
Oftentimes, the issue with that, though, Tom, is oftentimes people are applying for these site plans with the property under contract, so they're not the owners. So that's why we have them complete the statement saying, I have authority to apply on the owner's behalf.
All right, well, if, at the very least, if what you get is a representation, they have the authority to act for the.
That is part of our
owner
application
record.
process.
All right, well, I still think it's valid information, and
Like I
sometimes-
said, we will try to provide it as best we can. I just can't make
Okay.
promises some point. In this individual case, the assumption is that the engineer had the authority to apply on the developer's behalf, who has the authority to work on the property.
I believe we're going to get some clarification when the applicant comes up, so
Okay.
give me an indication, so.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We'll do our best to make that in the future. I'm just saying it's not feasible in every single circumstance. Sometimes owners truly want to stay out of the process.
All right, John?
Anticipating today a possible question about location and noise and a few things and stuff, I did go across the street earlier today and speak to the accounting people, and they have no problem with it. In addition to that, they are already buying another location, not because of this. They've already outgrown that building and they're moving anyway. But they were fine with it, and there weren't any other people.
Most of the restaurant operations are indoors. They are providing the pretty thick screening along the south property line as it transferred into that residential neighborhood. And on top of that, typically these restaurants hold pretty even hours, and even when they are later at night, the menu boards and stuff now are not overly loud anymore. You don't need
We
the
cannot
the
control
old
the
school speaker
aroma.
that blares it at you. They're a little bit more targeted. So, as compared to the car wash that we had, a good 6 months ago, where there's the outdoor vacuums and stuff, I mean, the vast majority of the work on site takes place indoors.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, Mr. Chairman, in a reference to the comment by Commissioner Baumgardt. Yes, I see that, it's a good idea to connect the dot, but if I look at the application, Excel Engineering Company, they're saying is Pentax Restaurant Group is requesting a site plan. So it seemed to me that the owner is a large investment company. It could be a bunch of investment LLC, and they have under them, one of the company is probably Pentax Restaurant Group, and they have hired the engineering, company Excel to apply. But I think if that, all it requires is maybe under the background. In future, if I were you, and based on the comment, I would probably add on behalf of the owners, which is an investment company, and under this, the applicant, Excel Engineering is applied, and that will connect the dot. But other than that, I think because a site plan review, I can see why the hired engineering company, Excel, has a lead to apply, because any kind of the technical modification or the questions or the details could be sidewalks, could be a site plan. The owner probably is, they just have to say yes or no, but everything has to be reviewed and approved by the engineering company, to make any modifications. So I can see that, but I share his comment, I think, to, kind of check the dots.
Okay.
I just want to say something. I agree with what Tom is saying, and it kind of leaves a gap between, because we don't really know who the owner is. And I'm sure the owner knows what's going on, but does he really know what we're actually approving?
Honestly, it doesn't matter. The person who applied on behalf is the person who we're interfacing with through the project. They're saying that they have the authority to work on it. It's not our job to make sure that everything's buttoned up on their back end. It's our job to review it and make sure it meets the village ordinances. There's nothing in the village ordinances that says we can only deal with the owner. So that's why we require the liability statement. And I understand why you guys want to know the background and the history, and we'll do our best. Again, I'm just saying, sometimes it's weird LLC investment groups, and they're from out of state, and it's like a nebulous body that is not really a single person or a local entity like it is like an individual homeowner. So we'll do our best again. We also required the narrative for them to submit, so make sure you read the application narrative as part of your packet, because oftentimes the applicants identify that information. So don't just read our executive summary and take a look at it. Please read the rest of the information that we provide you, because oftentimes they go into more detail, and we do our best not to rewrite their narrative. We try to take it from the village's point of view, not the applicant's
It's
point
not
of
in
view.
the narrative, I read it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it is in this one. I'm just saying oftentimes they do identify that structure in the narrative.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then I would invite the applicant up to address. Name and address, please.
My name is Reed Jans, R-E-I-D, last name Jans, J-A-H-N-S, 100 Camelot Drive, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
Can you answer the question?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I work for Excel Engineering. We're based out of Fond du Lac. We are the engineer for the project, preparing all the plan documents, working closely with the owner of the proposed Taco John's, which will be Pentex Restaurant Group. So that is your owner that we work closely with to develop all the plans.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions of Reed? Anything more you want to add?
We're excited to be a part of this project and community and help the community move forward. But no additional comments. Look forward to working with you to meet these proposed conditions of approval. All of them look good, and we look forward to working with you to get all of those addressed and basically move forward so we can start construction.
Do you know where the closest Taco John's is? Is it in Milwaukee? Or are you not familiar with those?
I'm not
Okay.
overly familiar.
Okay.
I just want a question.
Go ahead.
On the subject of sidewalks along the prairie side, do you see any problems with doing sidewalks or any particular complication?
There is some, it's kind of, right now, it's kind of like a ditch cross-section almost through there. So I will have to, get back in the office and really analyze it to see if we could sneak a sidewalk in along there or not. My biggest concern would be just making sure that we still are able to convey stormwater through that area, especially kind of in between the two driveways. Right now we're proposing a storm inlet to basically collect all that water. Since right now with this rural cross section, the water is draining off of the road and onto that green space. And then if we would, and the way it's designed is that then it will flow into the inlet, which basically we're collecting some of that off-site water. And if we would put a sidewalk through there at a higher elevation, then you'd basically either have water running over that sidewalk, or the sidewalk would be raised up that it would be trapping that water coming from the road towards our site. So you would basically be damming off that water or having water flow across your sidewalk, which could cause issues with ice and stuff in the wintertime, basically. That's just my initial thoughts there. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Reed or for Sam, staff?
Sound good.
Thank you, Reed.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions, go ahead, John.
A motion.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to have the commission approve the SP 23-1, subject to the recommended conditions for the Taco John location.
Second.
Joe, second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further comments? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck and welcome. Thank you. Right. Settle down over there. Next on the agenda is ordinance 1-2023, a zoning map amendment for 3528 Meacham Road, zoning map amendment ZMA 2215. Robin.
Apparently, there has been minimal to no damage of taxpayer property. Okay, this is 1/2023 zoning map amendment. This amends the zoning map from RH1 to B2. That's high-density residential to B2 community business. Map amendment would allow the legal division of the front and back office buildings You guys saw this as a part of the comprehensive plan amendment. I forgot the exact number, but it was 3 or 4, just a couple months ago. So basically, Catherine Hufford, Blue Sky Real Estate, applied to amend the zoning map. This map amendment would allow the legal division of the front and back, and they wish to sell one of the buildings separate from the other on the property. This is basically a zoning cleanup, not exactly a whole lot of complication here. It's just that it had been zoned multifamily residential for a long time, but it had been used as a business site. And so we're just zoning it as it's basically being operated as. And they're doing this in the cleanest way that preserves the most of their property rights. They would have been allowed to basically subdivide the property and sell it so long as it kept the exact same use as it did prior. But as it was an insurance agency, they wouldn't be able to change it to a dentist's office or something like that. So this way, by changing the zoning, they have the full ability to use anything in the B2 zoning thing. So it gives them their property rights. It meets all the B2 lot and building regulations, fiscal impact. They do not lie within any tax incremental district. There's no request for assistance. And the zoning map amendment will not affect the assessed value of the property. Our assessment is always based on the current use of the land, not of the zoning designation. We don't have any conditions for approval, and we recommend that the Plan Commission move to recommend approval of Ordinance 1/2023, zoning map amendment for 3528 Meacham Road. If you have any questions, I will feed them.
Tom?
I have a question. Right now, your write-up talks about 2 parcels, but they're not separate lots, are they? It's one lot.
So
correct?
they're not separate lots currently. They're basically 2 buildings on one lot, and they wish to split them into 2 separate parcels in order to be able to sell one. So either they would have had to condo plat it and do it that way, and that's what they plan on doing so far as the last thing I checked. But that would basically consider it 2 separate parcels, and they could sell one off.
But for today's purposes, we're going to, for a single parcel, create 2 different zoning classifications.
No, sorry if that's confusing. No, this is for a single parcel. We will be changing the zoning classification from RH1 to B2.
And we're leaving the other parcel with the designation it had.
So
Yes.
our master plan amendment affected both parcels. We are leaving the top parcel with the same zoning designation that it currently has because they've not applied to change their zoning designation.
Now, my next question relates to the use of a GIS aerial image for purposes of doing this. Is that customary practice, that a GIS as opposed to a survey?
It's just a basic, so they don't even have to provide a survey for a zoning map change. This is us doing it as a sort of a visual aid for you guys.
Okay, I'm just puzzled though, if we don't have a survey and we don't have established lot lines, then isn't this kind of a loosey-goosey? I mean, where is the line between the one zoning and the other? It's your GIS.
They will get a survey when they apply for the condo plat amendment. They'll have to get a survey that delineates what area is responsible for what, and all that sort of stuff. Sorry if that was, this is not loosey-goosey as much as any other thing that we do. The parcel number is delineated, that is associated with a certain area of land. That is what we're going to be rezoning. When they decide to split it via whatever method they choose to do, but it's probably going to be a condo plat, that's when they're going to be required to have a survey.
And they will be, whatever survey then is going to have to fall along the same line as you're drawing with your GIS, or can they?
Yeah, GIS isn't scientific. It could be off by a few feet based on how the photograph works and all that sort of stuff. But the meets and bounds description of the land, that's all held down at the Racine County Register of Deeds. So that's what they're using.
I got a question.
Sure.
there's only one driveway there, and then you're splitting this into two parcels. They will not- they
To
will
be
not-
clear, no one's splitting anything today.
Yeah.
It's just the zoning.
It's
The
just the-
property is staying exactly the same as it is. All you're being asked to consider is whether that parcel, which has two existing business buildings on it, should be zoned B2 to match the existing business. That's all you're being asked to consider. You don't have to worry about any parcel splits or anything else. We consider that at a separate time.
Yeah.
I just don't want us to go down a rabbit hole of something that we don't even have an application to consider.
Yeah, if they wanted to do a traditional land split, yeah, we would ask that exact question. That's a good question, and we would resolve that at that time. If they do a condo plat, they don't have to answer that question. Thank you.
Any other further questions of Robin or staff? If not, motion? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning commission to recommend approval of ordinance 1-2023, a zoning map amendment for 3528 Meacham Road, zoning map amendment ZMA-22-15 as presented by the staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Robin.
Sounds good.
Next will be ordinance 2-2023, a zoning map amendment for 1821 East Frontage Road, zoning map amendment ZMA 2216.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Carl Johnson from Stark Pavement Corp. applied to amend the zoning map from M2 General Industrial to M3 Intensive Extractive Industrial. The parcel is currently split zoned both M2 and M3. Per the zoning ordinances for existing and proposed uses and structures, the more restrictive provisions of the applicable zoning districts apply to the entire parcel except when one base zoning district applies to at least 75%. The total parcel area and the remainder of the parcel is less than 10,000 square feet in area. The regulations of the zoning districts that applies to the larger portion of the parcel applies to the entire parcel. So neither base district applies to at least 75% of the parcel area, so the most restrictive zoning district, M2, applies. The asphalt plant was previously allowed as a temporary conditional use, which is set to expire in 2023. The zoning code no longer has the applicable temporary conditional use allowances, so the applicant must now apply for permanent use under the applicable M3 zoning district. The map amendment would allow the permanent establishment of the existing temporary batch asphalt plant. Additionally, we went back and looked at the minutes from the previous time this was up for conditional use, and the Plan Commission at the time did indicate that they would like to either see the temporary use be fully established the next time this was up, or for them to stop using the site in general. So they decided they want to continue using the site, so now we're just trying to establish this as they're good in perpetuity. One of the overall goals of the 2020 zoning code rewrite was to steer the village away from unnecessary and habitual discretionary reviews, especially those that were perfunctory in nature. This conditional use was renewed for 2 more 3-year terms after its first temporary conditional use approval. The village staff doesn't think that something that's present for 9 years should be considered temporary or would be by village residents anymore either. So requiring a permanent approval process at this point is proof that the 2020 zoning code rewrite is working as intended. Ultimately, the staff found that this approach has saved time for staff and officials and saved developers time and money as well. Consistency with comprehensive plan and local planning area, the application follows the industrial business designation from the land use element of a multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan. The village does not have an adopted plan for local planning area 10. Neither the Village of Mount Pleasant Master Bicycle Plan nor Park and Open Space Plan for the Village of Mount Pleasant include any recommendations for the land. Now, this is a unique process. We haven't gone through an M3 rezone since we updated the zoning code. So what happens is when they apply for an M3 rezone, they need both a development plan and the M3 rezone. If you all approve that plan, then they can come back and apply for site plan approval, and that site plan would have to comply with whatever regulations you set up in the development plan. So they proposed some. We have a couple conditions that we would like to see them change it when they come in for their final site plan. But ultimately, if you're approving the zoning today, that site plan would end at the Plan Commission. So you're really saying, like, here's our recommendation to the village board of the overall rules for this parcel and the M3 nature of the parcel. Then they can come back. It's similar to a master plan development, but it's specific for this user. Does anyone have any questions about the process? I'm not going to read the 9 pages in total because it's a lot. I'll just try to highlight the things that we wanted to change on the conditions. In the large part, the application and the operations plan we had no issues with. We just wanted to call out a couple things. The zoning, the operations, everything looks pretty good. In terms of the M3 zoning, the applicant submitted an operation plan, restoration plan, and performance guarantees acknowledgement, which addresses the areas required by the ordinance. The village staff recommend that the Plan Commission require the applicant to update the operations plan to include a statement that they followed the lot and building regulations of the M2 district within the table. If you look at the M3 guidelines under the zoning code, it says when they establish a development plan, they should establish the lot and building guidelines for that plan. Because the asphalt batch plant is what it is and it complies under the M2 zoning guidelines, we thought just use the next closest applicable district in the M2, generally setting height limits at 60 feet, and setbacks are what they are. Also, the properties to the south have that zoning classification, so then the guidelines for this parcel would mirror the rest of the Rybar property to the south. So we thought that made sense. Additionally, the village staff recommend that the Plan Commission require the applicant to meet the village-wide regulations stated within Article 400 of the zoning chapter. That section, which we'll get into, describes the effects of those regulations and what they would have on a subsequent site plan review. Then village staff do not believe the village needs any formal monetary guarantees because the application, while zoned M3 and subject to the M3 zoning district ordinances, does not include any extractive uses like a quarry, for which the village intended the performance guarantees of the zoning chapter. The village staff believe the short, I lost my spot, sorry. The short development agreement draft, which the applicant proposed to record against the property, meets the performance guarantee requirement. We included that within your packet as well. Typically, when you see a quarry, there's some sort of like rolling financial guarantee that they re-up every year that makes it so they restore the big pit that they leave in the ground when they leave it to oftentimes parks or other types of natural uses. In this case, the applicant's not looking to put in a quarry, so to require them to continuously re-up a restoration plan seems a bit overkill. The property has direct access to the east frontage road, and the proposed operation should not have a negative impact on the adequacy, safety, or efficiency of the east frontage road's traffic. We haven't had any complaints from DOT or any of the neighboring properties regarding the existing operations traffic. And because they've been operating under a temporary license for 9 years, we kind of have a good idea of how they'll operate in the future. They've been totally fine on frontage road traffic. The operation does not require a traffic impact analysis. The application does not include any extractive uses and would have little impact on soil erosion. The Public Works Department would review any changes to site grading or drainage. And the application do not have any proposed uses which would practically prohibit the possibility of site restoration or future use as industrial zoned interstate adjacent land. So effectively, if the asphalt batch plant in Stark decides to pack up, Tom can use the property for any of the other uses under the industrial code that he'd want to apply, and the pavement operation shouldn't affect that possibility in the future. In terms of getting down to the village-wide regulations, the application does not require sanitary sewer service. There's not any within 350 feet. We wouldn't require connection to municipal sanitary service. The property does have an existing water main that they can access. Additionally, they did indicate they don't really use a lot of water on the property other than for dust mitigation, and they're using some of the adjacent storm water in terms of water recycling out there, so that's fine. The sidewalk and pedestrian circulation requires provision of a public sidewalk within the east frontage road. However, the DOT holds the final authority to require sidewalks in their right-of-way. Judging by when Tom developed the property further to the south as additional truck parking, the DOT came and said they didn't want a sidewalk in that right-of-way. So our assumption at staff is they would say the same thing for this north parcel. The section also requires an internal pedestrian circulation system which connects the buildings and other areas likely to be used by pedestrians and non-motorized travel to each other and the public sidewalk. Generally, this doesn't have a ton of internal pedestrian circulation, but we'll take a look at the final site plan and see where they identify those areas. The parking areas are tucked up against the building as they are now, and the rest of the area is really for employees only, and they're kind of outdoors walking around on the site. So I don't see a whole lot of upgrades needed there. Accessible parking would require the applicant to provide accessible parking facilities following the state and federal guidelines. There's plenty of parking out there, so they just have to delineate one of those and make sure the spot meets ADA requirements. The code would require the applicant pave all off-street parking areas and access drives with asphalt or concrete, pavement, or other hard dust-free surface approved by the village engineer. This might be an area where a little bit of paving is required, where the drives are going through. There is some gravel in that back area, so they might have to pave some where the trucks are kind of circulating through. But generally, the parking areas in the front are all paved, so it would be minimal to the entire site. The application would also require that the applicant supply 6-inch curb or wheel barrier when abutting required setbacks, landscape areas, or adjoining property lines. Those barriers would be found at least 2 feet from the edge of pavement or the area to be protected from encroachment. There's some of that out there now, but there are some parking along the north property line that I couldn't tell from the aerial whether they have curbs or wheel barriers. So if they don't, they would need to include those for the parking areas. In terms of outdoor lighting, we would need to see a full lighting plan to make sure that any newly proposed lighting meets the ordinances out there. Lot lines, color temperature, the same stuff out there. For landscape and screening, it would require that the site is brought into compliance with the landscaping and screening section. This is probably where there are the most number of changes to the site that would be required. The applicant would have to install one of the street frontage screening options for vehicular use areas listed next to the east frontage road. The applicant would have to install interior parking lot landscaping for the parking areas. They could reduce the amount of interior parking lot landscaping if they installed green infrastructure, such as permeable paving, rain gardens, or bioswales. That parking lot landscaping, most of it would, in going to the screening section later on, which I'll identify, could cross count as both. So there might just be a couple trees required in the internal parking lots. The ordinances would allow for a reduction also in the minimum required interior parking lot landscaping if the applicant proved that they would lose more than 10% of their total parking spaces due to the standard interior parking lot requirements. The north property line would require the applicant install one of the non-industrial district screening options for outdoor storage and work areas listed in the table. In their operation plan, the applicant proposed allowing the existing 10-foot aluminum fence to count as the screening choice. However, per option B, an opaque fence or wall must include 1 evergreen tree or 2 tall shrubs per 10 linear feet. Additionally, the village comprehensive plan shows a new public roadway along the, which would be east edge of the property, not west edge. Which, when constructed, would allow the public to view the site from a completely different angle. For this reason, the village staff do not recommend allowing the only aluminum fence proposal. While the zoning chapter would not mandate street frontage screening at the time of the development, the applicant and the property owner should take note that the property could be subject to those standards if the new roadway were constructed in the future. That's entirely development dependent, but if you look on your screen now, where the arrow is pointing, you can see that the DOT has an access plan that shows part of the frontage road getting realigned when those rear properties develop. So we just wanted to call that out as a note. Site plan review would require the applicant submit a landscape plan. The applicant could propose alternative compliance with the landscaping sections of the code. However, they must prove that the subject site has unique limitations, which make strict compliance with applicable landscaping and screening regulations impossible or impractical. In terms of fences and walls, the aluminum fence described in the operation plans does follow the section. The applicant cannot add electrified, barbed wire, razor wire, or any other type of fence designated to cause bodily harm, except by administrative site plan approval in the M3 district. So they could add those options, they just have to come back and specify where they're adding in a separate application. In terms of everything else, for performance standards, the village staff have received multiple complaints from an employee of the adjacent Honda dealership during the earlier temporary license period under which the asphalt plant ran. The village staff directed that person to file a municipal complaint and to file a complaint as specified under village ordinance through reference to state statute with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. The village staff do not believe the person ever filed either complaint. However, the village staff still acknowledge the potential for odor issues from an asphalt plant. There are several hotels within a half-mile north of the site which could have effects on tourism if the odors are not mitigated. In their operation plan, the applicant said the facility is currently permitted by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, shall remain compliant with all OSHA, DNR, and EPA environmental safety requirements. In addition to these requirements, Stark will also install an automated system that will inject an asphalt odor suppressant into each load of asphalt cement that gets delivered to the facility. So hopefully that addition will help mitigate some of those complaints that we've received in the past. As part of the application, you also saw that some of the other adjacent property owners weighing in on the application, they're in large part support of it. So the only complaints we've ever received is that one employee at Honda. Finally, the zoning map shows that the north half of the property would be subject to shoreline protection. The village staff do not believe this layer was updated after the development of the Honda dealership, so those regulations no longer apply. In terms of the development plan procedures, what we did in your executive summary is really just kind of verbatim respond to the zoning code because this is the first time you guys have seen one in a while. In general, this meets all the application requirements. They filed everything that they need to for development plan approval, as well as zoning map approval for M3 districts. In terms of a fiscal impact, the application does not lie within a tax incremental district, nor did the applicant request any tax incremental financing. The parcel does lie next to TIDs 1, 4, and 5, and in those TIDs, infrastructure and expenditure zones. The use currently exists as an approved temporary use, thus the existing property assessment is likely indicative of the zoning map amendment and will not affect the assessed value of the property. The property has an assessed value of $1.35 million. And is just over 9 acres. That is equivalent to about $150,000 an acre. The value lies below the village minimum target of about $1 million per acre. Intensive industrial uses often have lower values per acre than residential, commercial, or indoor-focused industrial uses as they have relatively few structures and take up larger amounts of land. Heavy outdoor industrial use has also been shown to depress land values. Nearby incompatible land uses such as residential or retail commercial. However, those same effects also occur within the immediate vicinity of interstate highways, which is present at the location. Therefore, the village staff believe the value per acre is typical of the use. The east frontage road is owned by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and maintained by Racine County. In terms of additional consideration, staff wish to iterate that is the Plan Commission's purview to weigh this land use request and the negative externalities thereof versus the potential opportunity loss of nearby development in the adjacent tax districts. With that, we recommend that the Plan Commission moves to recommend approval of the ordinance and development plan subject to the recommendations for approval. Those are the 3 I listed previously. The applicant shall update the operations plan section of the development plan to include a statement that they shall follow the lot and building regulations of the M2 district. The applicant shall update the operations plan section of the development plan stating that any approved site plan shall meet the village-wide regs stated within Article 400 of the zoning chapter. And 3, the applicant shall amend the operations plan section of the development plan stating they shall follow the outdoor storage and work area screening requirements of the code. That was a lot. I'm going to take a break. Do you all have any questions?
Yes, we do.
Well, I've got a question on both your write-up and your comments. Talk about a development plan and also talk about an operations plan. I picked up from your comments, those are separate plans. The operation plan is a subset of the development plan, am I
Correct.
correct? And to get the zoning changed, there has to be a concurrent submittal of a development plan, and also an operations plan.
Yep.
So do I understand from you, those two plans, or that development and operation plans have been submitted to
Yes.
the village?
Yep,
And your office reviews that?
correct.
Okay, are any other departments or areas of the village have to review those plans?
Generally, no, not as part of this step. If they did move forward with a site plan and they do propose to modify the grading, then the engineering department would get involved.
Personally, I view, this sort of a use as pretty intensive, with the potential to be a problem to neighbors and to have an adverse potential effect on neighboring properties, and also to impact the development of the area. Do you feel that you and Sam are qualified to review an operation plan of this type of a use?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you two gauge the potential noxious possible adverse effects of this property on its neighbors?
Well, it's a unique circumstance because it's not a potential. It's been out there for 9 years, so this isn't like they're coming and asking for permanent establishment of the use that's already there, not something that we're talking about in theory. So in that way, it makes it a little bit easier. We haven't received a lot of complaints, and evidence that the existing use is not that noxious compared to the adjacent interstate, which, let's not discredit, is not like a black hole. It is 6 or 8 lanes now of truck and vehicle traffic, which is putting off way more emissions than this plant is. So for context sake, we take that into account due to its location. It's not like this is being proposed in the middle of a rural or a residential area. It's already adjacent to a bunch of auto fumes, mixture of diesel and normal cars, obviously. And then the other evidence that I looked at when I was reviewing this was both Brooks Tractor and the Honda dealership have developed their buildings and made those investments in that property after this asphalt plant was already established. So you have two auto-focused uses paying to be directly adjacent to this property, even though they saw this there. So that's not to say we shouldn't weigh the future potential development behind. But in my experience at the village, the general market, the people who are willing to pay to be the closest to the interstate are often the most auto-intensive or truck-intensive uses. And I think when in relation to that, this is not entirely out of sorts. And we've had 2 pretty large developments go by and make those investments with this existing already.
Well, you talk about 9 years. I mean, the nature of the development in 9 years has changed too.
Of course.
I mean, I can argue that the 9 years, sure, maybe there wasn't obnoxious to neighbors 9 years ago when it was mostly farm fields, but that's not the case now. And there's still a lot of land to develop in that area. And the frontage road really, for so many people driving the 94 corridor, when they look to the east off the interstate, that's what they see and that's what they think of Mount Pleasant. And right now, I think a lot of people look at that and think Mount Pleasant is becoming a parking lot and for trucking along the interstate as well as a warehouse space. And they wouldn't be that wrong from what's out there. And I just noticed you at the end of your write-up, you say staff is entitled to weigh this against potential opportunity loss of nearby developments in the area. So you raise that consideration option, but you don't address it all at all.
That's a lot of me. That's me. So basically, it's just kind of setting the purview of the Plan Commission. And one of your overall goals of the purpose of the Plan Commission is to weigh making these kind of decisions that honestly are judgment calls. This is a use that does have some adverse impacts that we talk about. We talked about, pollution, lowering the potential value of incompatible uses, much as the interstate does it already. And we also talk about how that can affect those things. We also say that there's nearby hotels within a half mile of here. And we mentioned that there have been complaints among an employee of the Racine Honda dealership. all of that kind of, rolls into it and say that you guys have to consider that, there is potential other development out there. This is a perfectly fine use, but as far as, overall village strategy and all that sort of stuff, this is why we have the Plan Commission review and chew things through. We would be remiss if we didn't say that that was a kind of a decision, a subjective decision that you guys have the right to make. Whether, you feel that this is appropriate for that corridor, or because of the presence of TID 4 and TID 5, like literally adjacent.
Robin is saying, we have our formal recommendation in there. We recommend that you approve this from a staff level, subject to the conditions that we laid out. I think those conditions would create a site plan. While this isn't the world's best use, would make the site look, at least follow the rest of the ordinances that every other site would have to follow in the village. They would be required to upgrade the site a little bit. You're not just saying what's out there now is good as a permanent nature, but it is trying to balance, that right. If you deny this and the property goes back to just an M2 allowable zone, they could still park trucks out there. You're not gonna, denying this is not gonna completely redevelop the site. He still has permitted industrial use on the property, Tom does as a property owner. So, this is really, we thought that's how we're trying to thread that needle, and we thought with those recommendations of following the other strict screening guidelines that we have in the zoning code that we make other new properties follow, that this would be about as good as it can be. But ultimately, it's a legislative decision. So we make a recommendation to you, you agree, disagree, and then the village board has to make the same call. So this is not one where we're saying like, you basically got to rubber stamp it, but you might be able to move a tree from this side of the property to that side of the property. This is one we're saying, in our view, we think it's good, but you very well may disagree with us.
Yeah, it was basically setting up the parameters of the judgment call that you have as a board. So.
If I could just ask one kind of related question then. This operational plan and the development plan that's in writing, going forward, does that stay in effect for forever, or
Yeah,
what's?
for the length of the M3 use, yeah.
Okay.
And if they ever wanted to, we didn't include the modification sections in here, but if you look in the zoning code, if they ever wanted to modify that operations plan or the bigger development plan, they would have to come back and go through the process again for your approval. So this is pretty specific to what they're proposing right now.
And you're comfortable, relatively assured that the plan is specific enough, because we haven't seen it, so I can't, it's going to, for instance, they're not going to be able to do extractive work. It flat out prohibits that going
No,
forward.
they identify in the plan that this is for an asphalt batch plant. So if they wanted to change that and come back and try to permit one of the other extractive uses, they would have to go through the entire process and submit a new development plan with that proposed use.
And my last comment, going back to my prior comment, here we've got an owner who's not the applicant. Stark's running a asphalt plant. I don't even know, are they tenants?
Yeah, so
Their use of the property is
Yeah.
not exactly a.
both are here, so they can answer that question for you, both the owner and the applicant. So
Because-
this one's a little bit cleaner, but
Our changing the amendment to an extent rides on your and the village's confidence in his, good faith and good practices to date. So that's why I'd like to, when he
Yeah,
stands
and
up and tell us who he is.
to be fair, from our perspective at least, Carl and Stark have been good operators of an asphalt batch plant. I fully understand it's a use that nobody likes, but you have to put them somewhere, right? So in terms of someone applying, being open and honest and working with the staff, submitting applications on time, setting up pre-development meetings, doing everything by the book, Stark has been as good of a partner as you could hope for this specific use. So that also plays into our recommendation as well. We're not completely applicant agnostic. If they had a bunch of complaints before and never got back to us and, didn't pay their application fees on time and stuff, we might be a little bit more hesitant, but they've been completely above the board. And, we appreciate that because obviously the village and residents want to keep a close eye on these types of uses.
It says here, Stark will install an automated deodorant injection system to mitigate odor-related issues. How does that work and how much of an impact does that?
I'll let them speak to that, Tosh. If there's any other questions for me, let me know, otherwise, we can invite them up.
We do have a comment here, John.
I do.
Go ahead.
Having lived on the Sorensen Road from 1973 to 2019, and then after my wife passed away, I decided to move for other reasons. I have not had any phone calls when I lived out there, nor had I have any phone calls or people knocking on my doors regarding this type of an operation or anything down there. There were times when a farm down the road, the manure probably was worse than anything like that. They no longer have that either. And it's a nice place to live and everything. We've got a lot of, this is the type of trucking and other things that we wanted out by the interstate rather than in town or in the village and some other places and everything. And too, this is an open air area. It's been out there for a number of years. It's been really, if I had any complaints, I had more complaints, and he knows exactly where the cows used to be, and they're no longer there. And now, yes, there's lots of combines and tractors and stuff, but it's all grain dealers out there. Even the cabbage is kind of gone and everything then too. But, so I will fully support this.
Joel?
Yeah, my only concern right now is the fact that we're going to be rezoning the entire parcel. So right now, you've got a plan in place to have an asphalt plant in its current location, but this also opens up the front of the property to put another plant in of some type. High industrial, could be cement contract, and by right, they would be able to do that.
They would have to come in and re-up their development plan to specify that use, and then submit a site plan to do that. There is a building in the front, so, they'd need to work around that as well.
I understand,
But
but
I understand your logic.
Everybody,
I mean, it
because
is-
they can expand that now all the way to the frontage road. It's one thing where they're sitting today, deep on the property, and it's not as visible, but it could, in fact, there's other things that can go by right in front of that now, even if they want to tear the buildings down.
Yeah, and it's just the tough part. I mean, we made the tough call, and I think we talked about it when we went through the zoning code. I think that's why they originally split zoned the parcel. So the back was M3, and then you couldn't encroach that use up in the front parcel. But allowing split zoning creates other issues on whether, I think on the Campbell Woods property, people used zoning as a buffer to zone certain things and then have internal, more intensive uses, but within the same parcel. You end up dealing with these things where you're driving through one use to get to another, and without the hard lot lines, sometimes that causes issues in where you measure setbacks and things like that. So we made the call, and I think everyone agreed that it would be tough when it played out. I mean, you're asked to make a tough decision today, but we're at least making a permanent decision as opposed to like a half measure. Whether that's in affirmative or negative, at least you're duly considering the entire thing.
Sam, I have a question. So if they do have to submit a new development and operation plan if they wanted to expand or modify the use or anything like that, there's nothing that says that we have to accept that change, correct?
That is correct. So they would be allowed to apply under it, but that development plan does rein them in from the by right use a little bit more than your standard. We couldn't prevent Taco John's from applying on a B3 parcel. So it is a little bit more specific. I understand where you're going down, but yeah, Robin's correct. They would need to come in and modify a couple plans that, for whatever reason at that time, the plan commission or village board could deny. Say traffic got worse, or the air quality got worse, or something like that. So you'd have to take that application when it came at that time. But
Now, and I know the reasoning behind the fact that we're trying to do this as on a permanent basis because we no longer have a temporary in the ordinance. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure that was a good thing to do. Because in the future, if somebody else comes along and we have a massive need for a batch plant temporarily, we can't do it.
It's something
we've
we've
actually
thought of, yeah.
hurt ourselves by doing that because we can no longer allow somebody to do it temporarily, which
I think in this circumstance, I would argue it that we're doing the right thing by making them go permanent way because they've been out there so long anyways. But I understand your point in regard to a potential different project. I can say, we haven't got to the strategic plan update for this year yet, but one of our goals is to reassess our industrial and business districts and to try to help them make a little bit more sense. I think this process is probably a little bit complicated, judging by the questions that you're asking. Not that they've been bad questions, but I think some of the language could be tweaked. Some of the uses in particular could be cleaned up or modified as well. Particularly how industrial plays with business park and those types of delineation of uses. So it's already on our schedule to take a wider look at that, and I think we can take a look at temporary plants. Oftentimes, if it were a part of that project, it might be an accessory use to the construction project. So I think we could permit it right now. Say if it was, another 1 million square foot building and they wanted to pour the, tilt-up panels on site, we would allow that as an accessory use to the primary permitted use while it's under a construction site. So we could permit it now, but perhaps that language could be cleaner. I'm not above taking a second look at it for sure.
We may go back and come up with something that says you can get a 3-year temporary with
Sure.
only one renewal, so for maximum of 6 years type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, the operations, just to chime in, the operation plan is also kind of flexible. I mean, normally when it's normally when it's used for an extractive purpose, that is a limited time engagement. So it's set up so that you could say that there's an expiration date on it. It just would require everything else to be right, like zoning it and all that sort of stuff, to be able to set up said operation plan. But if the operation said, okay, it's done here, or these are the terms of renewal, then that would be dictated by that. So I just think that this is an overall cleaner way, because the old conditional use didn't have a whole lot of terms or clarity on it. So there you go.
Okay. And my last comment was in regards to the access to the water for dust mitigation. In regards to when we have a drought time, where do they get the water from?
There is a water main, so they could tap into the water main in the frontage road as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's municipal water.
There's water and sewer coming down Louis Sorensen Road to the frontage, so.
Correct, further south, but there's a directly adjacent water main to this parcel that they could tap. I'm sure the water utility would love that if that happened.
Any other questions?
Love to sell water.
Any other questions for Sam or Robin? If not, gentlemen, you're welcome to come up and address. We can get name and addresses.
Way to hang in there, Sam.
Good afternoon. Carl Johnson, 1821 Southeast Frontage Road, Mount Pleasant, doing business as Stark Pavement Corporation. So yeah, I guess I will, I really would defer to the Plan Commission. I'm really here to answer your questions and help clarify anything about our operation. Commissioner Meyer's comments, I think, were very well founded. The reason we're here, the genesis of all this, was a response to the zoning codes. I mean, where we're currently located, we are correctly zoned on a section of M3 land. Just unfortunately, the way everything was codified, we have to go through this process in order just to keep doing what we're doing. So that's what we're here for. Hopefully we can address any concerns you guys have and proceed accordingly.
Commissioners, questions? Go ahead.
No, I don't have a question, but in reference to your comments and the comments that commissioners have brought, I think is a situation which is good, that you go from, after 9 years of the temporary use, that this application is really to convert that from the rezone from the temporary use to the M3, which is a permanent extraction and the intensive industrial. And as opposed to if a brand new industry was coming, then there probably would be some, issues about concern about the environment impact and the impact on the neighbors and the overall area. To me, I think whether by design or maybe in this case, not by design, but we have 9 years of experience to make sure that there was no adverse impact. So I don't have any comment, but except for maybe Sam and Robin, that you made a comment that we look at the ordinances for the industrial use, I think we should have that option open to go from the temporary, because if after the temporary, if the community, if it has adverse impact on the community, that's the process to stop. So, I don't have any comment as long as you don't come back with a brand-new development plan or the operational plan that's going to amplify or magnify it many times. I think it's a good way.
Yes, point taken. We're looking to keep this as consistent with what you've seen out of that, that facility from the past 9 years.
Sure.
Carl, how much of an impact does that automated deodorant injection system have?
So we have another location in Milwaukee that's right on the interstate. It's very common. We're either in a quarry or we're right next to an interstate. That's the most common locations for an asphalt plant. We have one that's right in the city of Milwaukee, and we have large asphalt, liquid asphalt tank storage there. And in response to complaints from an individual that was relayed to us from the DNR, we began using deodorant up there, and I haven't had a complaint since. So I know other asphalt producers in this market utilize the same systems as a matter of routine now, just to be better neighbors. And I think the other point that was made that, 9 years ago when we started, it was all farm fields, and there weren't any complaints. I believe the only complaint we've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been from that one individual from the Honda dealership, which I think has been open 3 years now. Having only one complaint, we're still willing to go through and do this. And the system's, it's pretty straightforward. We have a pump. When a truck backs up into the asphalt plant to unload the liquid asphalt cement, they have to turn a pump on to pump it into our storage tanks. So as soon as that pump turns on, it activates a secondary pump that injects the deodorant into the line. And that's generally the smelliest instance of asphalt operations, just because as you're filling a tank with hot liquid asphalt, you're displacing the air that was in that tank, and that air gets vented out, and that's what kind of generates the smell. So if you're injecting a deodorant additive at that time, it should mitigate the odor complaint.
Thank you.
Which state or federal agencies mostly regulate your activities along the lines of trying to mitigate impacts on neighbors?
Well, generally, the air permitting is all handled through Wisconsin DNR, and they follow EPA guidelines for factors such as per ton of asphalt produced, how much of the critical pollutants are generated into the atmosphere, and what's allowable. So we routinely test our emissions from our stack per the DNR guidelines, which follow EPA guidelines as far as what the thresholds are for those materials.
Thanks.
What's the difference between a permanent and a temporary site? Are you going to be keeping virtually the same equipment there, or are you going to be building something new down there?
No, everything will stay the same. If you look at a temporary site, generally these are components, asphalt plant components that just come on skiddable trailers. So like if you look at our mixing drum, you'll see axles and tires underneath it, because you can take that down, hook it up to a truck, and tow it off site, versus a permanent facility which is built on site. They put it on, permanent steel, structural steel foundations that are anchored to the ground. That's not one of those sites. So this site could theoretically be moved. However, since we've been there for 9 years, we've hooked up to line power just to capture, utilities efficiencies and things like that. But it still could be moved, and as part of our performance guarantee, we stated that should we cease operations, we could promptly remove any asphalt production equipment from the site in a prompt manner.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Carl?
I didn't have a question, but just a point that that Honda dealership has also subsequently been sold since it developed. So that's been two owner-operators of that Honda dealership, the original developer, and then they sold to the entity that took over the Hyundai, the Toyota, and the Honda dealership out there. So yeah, Ziegler. So someone's taken a second look at that site and still made the investment to purchase that property at the same point, which I forgot to mention, but did play into some of our arithmetic as well.
And this activity would put forth that this is a permanent, for whatever permanent is, to the other landowners that would potentially want to develop there. They'll know now that this is their neighbor.
Correct.
It's not temporary.
And I think that's looking at things like the deodorizing system and things of that nature, and making sure we have adequate screening. Asphalt plants are ubiquitous across the country. It's 90% of all our paved surfaces are asphalt, so we can be a very good neighbor, and I welcome the opportunity to demonstrate that to the village.
All right, thank you, Carl.
Does it sound better if we said macadam?
I'm fine with all the old lingo, but I also try to, asphalt's a very active lobbying group, and so they have their chosen language at times, but whatever you guys are comfortable with, I'm too.
All right. Thank you. Commissioners, what's your prerogative here?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I move for the planning commission to approve ordinance 2-2023, a zoning map amendment for 1821 East Frontage Road, zoning map amendment ZMA-22-16, development plan DP-22-1, as presented and discussed.
I second.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments?
Just with the recommended conditions for approval on there.
Okay, noted.
Ram, add it with the recommend.
Yes, with the recommend, it was as presented and discussed to me in my mind.
Gotcha.
That includes all those conditions, yeah.
Very good.
I'm still a second.
Okay, still a second, okay. Any other public comment or any public comment at all? None. All right. And I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 4-1. Five, no, excuse me, 6-1. All right, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck. We'll see you back here. Next, we're looking at staff reports. George, you ready?
All right. Fairly light report this month. Just wanted to touch base. So our recreation software that we've talked about in the previous, we have our launch date, which will be February 6th here. We had some things we wanted to fix on the back end prior to launching for that first week of picnic reservations, which I'll touch on next. So we wanted to give the opportunity for people to still come in person, take care of their normal routines of how they would do their permits. So we gave a little bit of a buffer. Now this launch will tie in with the same dates that we launched our summer registration programs in February. So just from a timeline schedule, it just made a lot more sense. So,
George, I hate to interrupt, but for the clarification, so when you say the software launch, that's the software that's the date when the public can start to use the software, or?
correct. Yeah, it's actually live right now, so people can create households and those sort of things. But to be actually able to submit reservation requests to actually register for our Park and Rec programs, that won't be until February 6th.
Okay.
But yeah, the site is live. We've got our departmental information on there. People can still browse. They can still see facilities, and it's just they can't really do any of the actual applications aside from creating their households. So,
Good. Thank you.
and so I touched on. So we had our January 3rd was the start of permit season. We had a line of about 10 individuals at 8 a.m. here. Within those first 2 weeks, we already have 13 bookings out at Smolenski. We only have one available Saturday in June, no Saturdays in July, one Saturday in August, and 2 Saturdays in September. So you can just see how quickly those things book up here. And then we also, this was coordinated beforehand, but we will have one beer garden out at Smolenski Park the last weekend of June into July 1st. So, and then the last thing that I had was I will be attending the Wisconsin Park and Rec Association's conference February 1st and 2nd. So this will be my first time being able to attend. It was canceled for COVID for a couple of years here. So good opportunity for me to network with a lot of the other people in the industry and in the state, talk with some individuals from the city. So I know that they'll be having a large amount of group of people there. So I'll be able to report back on that at the next February meeting as well. So.
Are those meetings something that you can make presentations at?
Yes.
Like Sam and Robin have done?
Yep. Yeah. So I had helped with presentations when I worked in Illinois for their state conference before. I've participated in roundtables and panel discussions and those sort of things, been room host for it. So yeah, a lot of times you can apply to present. I know I had previously attended athletic business conference in the past, that if you submitted a presentation that was accepted, they paid for your registration. So there's different opportunities too if you actually participate in that. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Haven't again attended this particular conference before, but in order to keep my certification good too, I need continuing education units. So this will just be looking at the sessions offered. There's a lot of good information. So if you go to WPRA's website, you can actually see some of the sessions that are available. So, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to it, and I'll have a report on that in February.
Where is it?
Kalahari. So, yep, Wisconsin Dells for this year. I am not taking the kids out. Yeah, I'm just, yeah. That was a tough sell. I'm only staying one night, so.
George, what kind of a certification do you have to have?
Well, it's not anything that you have to have. I'm a certified park and rec professional, the CPRP. I'm not aware of any. There might be a few people in Racine County. I might be one of the only few that has that certification. So it's a tough exam. I'll be honest, I failed the first time that I took it several years ago. I was pretty fresh out of school. So you maintain CEUs to prove that you're continuing to improve as a professional and maintain that certification. So.
Good.
Right, excellent.
Yeah, I'll give you one question that is always on there: orientations of tennis and pickleball courts. It's on the exam. It must be north and south. So if you ever take the test, there's your bonus question that you know you can get right. So.
Okay.
You want to make any remarks about across the street?
Oh, yeah, it's there. I don't have much to update on. I'm working with our contractor still. We're getting together the maintenance plan for all the landscape stuff out there. So I'm working with, I got a proposal an outline of the instructions of what we need to do to maintain warranties and such for the plants. So we're reviewing that internally to see if that's something we can maintain with the assistance of DPW. If we can't, then we would have to go out to contract out those services just to really make sure that we're taking care of it in year one so we can get it to a point that's easier for us to maintain.
First activities, May, June, July?
Likely the first weekend in June. That's still our target. So as I mentioned before, it's really, as soon as we get out there in April, we'll have a better clear cut. We're going to proceed as if we're operating that first weekend in June, but yeah.
Get a lot of questions about when and how, and when people happen all of a sudden drive by and see it,
Yep.
They get excited. And even where I live with the elderly people where I live, they're talking about grandkids and great grandkids coming over and too. But it's been very nice to watch it, even though there's been no snow or anything like that. I don't know if that's good or bad. At least there's enough other moisture going into the ground.
Yeah, and the few times we've been out there for various things inside the building that we're still working on, I've seen several people using the Smolinski Trail, pickleball. There were still people there last week playing.
Yep.
So it's still getting used. People are using the playground again, so it's good to see. You can see in the parking lot we've got all of our picnic tables put together now too.
I did see that, yes.
So
They're not stacked, they're just spread out.
yeah, I think I just got the report. There was about 38 put together. 20 garbage cans, so they're all ready to be put
Waiting
out.
for use.
Exactly.
George, quick question on operations type thing down there. The splash pad.
Yep.
Are we going to is there going to be an attendant there full time, or how do we do that, or how does that work?
No, so it will be set up on a timer essentially, and then it's hand activated. So I showed it in one of the pictures. It's like an orange or yellowish post that activates it, and then it goes on for a duration of time that we determine, and then it's similar to like a whirlpool at like a hotel, or you get out and turn the knob back on, but they just wave it for activation. So when people aren't there, it will automatically turn off.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious because obviously it's going to be a very popular place, and I'm just wondering if anybody's going to be watching to make sure that people are behaving themselves, if you will. That's kind of what my thought is.
Yeah, and so the thing we'll have is, we will have staff out there for playgrounds, because we will turn it into a playground site so during Monday through Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 3:30, we'll have our own staff members will be out there. Then maybe an hour or two break before we start softball out there. So from Monday through Friday, we generally are going to have staff members out there, and then the same thing with our weekend use. If we move our kickball program out there, or if we want to offer additional programs, we likely will have staff member. But I don't think we'll staff it at first, and we'll have to kind of see how it goes from there. Appropriate signage out there for rules and different things like that. But yeah, there's no plans for an attendant at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have security cameras out there 24/7?
We have them on the building. Yep. So we were met with Jennifer and Dustin out there on positioning to see which areas we can hit. But at some of the other parks we don't have that either. It's not something that's too common in a lot of parks, but it's usually monitoring the buildings where there be potential vandalism and such.
Mr. Chairman, George, is there a phone number there? Is there going to be a 1-800 or something, the number called in case, if people have any emergency or problem instead of 911, is there any way, for people to say, hey, this thing is not working, or like you say, if there's any vandalism or something, because it's one thing to have the camera,
Sure.
Another one is for people to be able to call somebody and bring to your attention instead of calling 911 all the time.
Of course, yeah. So we have our number gets posted like on picnic reservations for any issues that people would have during reservations. So we likely do something similar to that. We also set up that email address with the new registration software. That's a general inbox that goes to myself and Brittany. That it's like Parks and Rec at MT Pleasant, so people could utilize and send any issues that they could at that time to that generic inbox. So we have a couple of opportunities for that.
Yeah, the emails are good, but my thought is along the security camera. If you're over there, you're playing with the kids or grandkids, and something is not there or not working, or you find something which is not normal, could be vandalism, could be whatever, then instead of logging on the email, somebody should be able to call and say, hey, there's a problem. Yeah, it's just like it.
George, we still got cameras down on Meacham, or down by the cop house, right, on that playground and everything?
I don't know exactly. I haven't seen that one. I know there is one on the cop house specifically. I don't know how far off that sees.
Well, we had one on the business across the street shining, or coming back too. But I know from the cop house it goes over to the playground. It has in the past anyway.
I don't think there's one. In talking to the owner, because he sold that building, I don't believe there is a camera on that particular building. I think there was definitely.
That was George Cedar, and he did sell that. So
yes.
you're right.
Yeah, I believe he did mention that there was potential for that, but I don't think that ever happened.
Mr. Chairman, and then I just have a comment, and that's probably more at Lisa than you, George, but I think communication is the most important. Again, we're glad to hear the dates of the software launch and how your permits have already been kind of active, but communication. I hope that we have a user-friendly, easy-to-use information on the website, and even beyond that, the people in the community, they should be totally aware that the season is coming, when the start date is, how the reservation, and it should be a user-friendly tab on the website, or maybe some additional communication, communicate with the people.
Yeah, and we had that insert in the recent sewer bill that specifically cited that this new software was coming to ease everybody's way to doing it. The selection of the one that we went with provides YouTube tutorials, written instructions on how to create it, walkthroughs basically of anybody who wants to do it. And I say we'd be available by phone to assist anybody through the process, but we really went with a really user-friendly software. You know, if somebody needs to submit a municipal complaint, they still need to create an account and go through OpenGov. So it's something within the village that people should be aware of. You know, that sometimes you have to create an account to do certain things, but yeah, it's pretty intuitive. It's web-based. It's mobile-friendly. It's actually more simplistic than what we had previously and since we didn't have any online picnic reservation software, it's you know, a perfect blend of that between what we can get for our recreation programs now and the facility requests. So.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to make one more comment. Terry and I ran into John Greenwood a couple weeks ago, and he wanted to say what a great thing he's seeing now. You know, everybody doesn't know him. He's the one that donated the playground equipment. So he started that whole push to get that going out there. So he's really excited to see the completion going on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, it's complete. You know, it has a complete vision out there now. So, yeah, it's May and June can't come soon enough. So. Yep.
A quick question, do you hear anything from the cricket people in terms of interest or stay in touch? Because I'm just personally just really curious whether cricket will be of any interest to really take off.
Yeah, so I mentioned this at the board presentation in December. So prior to me starting, I think it was in either 2017 or 2018, maybe Joe could correct me on it, they approached the Park and Rec Advisory Board at that time, and they were told that they could have an option out at Smolinski Park. Well, that setup wasn't the way that it needed to be for it. So I've had discussions with them since that time frame, and it was a difficult phone call when I told them that there's a chance they would not be able to play this summer because we need that athletic turf to come in. So they were ready to already start play this upcoming summer out there. So that communication has been open this entire time, and we literally have a tenant ready to go to use those fields as soon as we give them the okay. So, and the best part about the way we designed it is that if this cricket group becomes less passionate in the future down the road, we have 2 giant play fields that could suit up to U12 soccer, lacrosse, flag football. Any of this, it was set up to drain properly out there for this. So we have 2 athletic fields that will get used even if cricket. The only thing out of that would be just that cement slab that was put in there, but it's a nice divider for the fields. So that's why we designed it the way that we did. So even if this group falls through down the road, we still have multiple use out there.
Good deal. All right, thank you, George.
Yep, no problem.
Did we save time for Robin? I think we did.
No.
I was always just thinking, they get that council circle out there, and there's 7 seats on that council circle. I think we should, start moving our meetings out there and the village board meetings and stuff. Vote by torch.
I'd be open.
What do you think, Sam?
Oh, that's Malinsky.
No comment. So this is staff approved permits. These are the ones that all have been completed within the past 35 days. Administrative adjustments, CPA. Some of these are basically permits that are also issued through the planning commission. But there's sign permits, site plan reviews, wireless communications, zoning compliance, and variances.
Robin, could I ask you in the future, could you put on what these are? Because all you're giving is the name of the applicant and an address. What are these businesses? If you could.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, for most of the, I can get a business name for most of them. If you have any particular questions, I know most of them. But
No, but I'm just seeing the applicant name. It's like, it's like seeing a liquor license to an applicant but not knowing the establishment.
well, you're gonna get a hoot of what I did for the municipal complaints. All right. So, and this is the ones that are active, that are basically have been applied for, that have not been completed yet. So these are just ones that are currently in the process. Some of those you have reviewed today. Municipal complaints. These are the ones that have been completed. You notice that there is a column for the name, but I made it a certain color so you can't see who submitted the complaints. I feel really clever for that. But these are the ones that we have completed. Some of them, a lot of them are also. This is a shared endeavor. This particular list is between myself, Teresa, and some other, PD and whatnot. But most of the complaints come down to me and Teresa. So.
Robin, are most of the municipal complaints filed by citizens, or how often is it that your department unilaterally takes action?
Very, very seldomly, because for us to do it unilaterally, that would kind of presume that it's a different process than anybody else gets to have. Now, certain kind of things that are so egregious that if you just kind of see it in your day-to-day, then we'll take action. Like for me, just driving around or whatever, at the village, seeing, flagrant violations, say if you have 8 junk cars in your yard, that's going to get, me to start that. Also, some village employees submit municipal complaints on their own time because they are also residents of the village. So it's very rare that is based from complaints, and that's just so we can kind of, I guess, hyper focus on what's bothering people. I would think a more we don't have the staff to do it otherwise, and we've mentioned that in strategic planning that we would like additional, let's call it proactive enforcement, but we don't have the staff for that right now. So, and that would also probably be a little bit more of a quasi cooperation between PD and us. So like it would be almost like a zoning officer would probably be a hybrid position between us and the police department, because they would need to be issuing permit or violations and citations, which would be, they would have to be in their track system. So, and also when it comes to knocking on people's doors, I don't like doing that. So I call them anyway. So, and that is it. There's another list of currently active ones, but that doesn't seem to be a part of this presentation. Maybe it didn't get in time, but you'll see those next month.
Mr. Chairman, to Tom's questions, I'd like to comment. I think in every year I probably get 3-4 phone calls or the emails from the residents. So most of these complaints are coming from the residents or businesses. Typical complaint is that in my street there's a trash over there and nobody's cleaning. So I guide them, people saying go on the website and there's a complaint form, and that goes to Lisa, and then it's logged in and processed. Recently there was a complaint from the neighborhood that neighbor is keeping the lights on all the time. If you remember, it was last month.
Yeah,
And
I
then
checked that
call the
out.
Police, and the police is not doing anything. Again, if you call somebody, that's one thing, but log in the complaint, fill the complaint form, and then it goes into the system, and police are take care of it. And so it could be complaint like that, lights are on, or my neighbors are, they burn the bushes all the time, there's smoke coming. So most of the time, it's the businesses or the residents, who call or who log in the complaint. And but I think, once you direct them what the process is, everyone is happy. And once in a while, I do get a call from some citizen who says, I don't have the time to log in. I'm not going to do that. I'm calling you. Then I go to recently I went to his house. I said, here's a copy of the complaint form, and I give you 3 extra copies for the future complaint. But follow the process, but it works pretty good.
Yeah. I will say, if you do have residents talk to you guys about municipal complaint situations, one thing that I always say when I get on the phone is that there is like good neighbor following all the rules, and there is a lot of gray area till you get to the mark where it's deserving of a $600 citation.
Yeah.
All of that area I call not quite so good neighbor, could be better. And I think all of us, every human being has had not quite so good, could be better moments, and that's just kind of how I explain these things. And hopefully they get better. You just don't want to see anything get worse. So that's my strategy. And for that, thank you very much, and see you next month.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
Sam?
Nothing from me this month.
All right.
Move to adjourn.
There we go. Second. We have a motion, a second. All in favor?